surviving structures that was standing in Salem during the time of the witch trials. It was lived in by one of the judges, Judge Jonathan Corwin. He purchased this house in 1675 and lived here with his wife and 10 children. It is important to note that most of his kids did not live long enough to see adolescence. This was rather common for the New England settlers, and they would prefer to wage their bets on a higher number. Now, if you go to this museum, which I do recommend, and you look closely, you will see some interesting tidbits of what witchcraft would have looked like back then, such as folk magic, image magic, cursing. An example of image magic. We might know it today as voodoo dolls, but in Europe and New England, they were called poppets. Just a doll wrapped in rags. Now, maybe you fill this doll with specific herbs. Maybe you time your practice to an appropriate moment of the lunar cycle. You take a needle and you stick the puppet, and with your imagination and emotional intent, you were either healing or harming your intended target. That was the idea anyway. Now, several of the victims who were executed for witchcraft that year had the evidence used against them in court that they were keeping puppets in their home. Something that is rather unique as far as New England witch hunts is concerned was the signing of the Devil's Book. Now, the Puritans, they were among the most literate cultures in the 17th century. Probably the most literate group of people that had lived up until that point. Reading and writing was extraordinarily important to them because they believed that everyone should be able to read and interpret the Bible for themselves, including women and children, not just have it be orated to them by a priest.
You're going to sleep on the way home, right?
Call it a superstition.
An hour?
These folks very much believed that the devil would to sign his book. So, I have a book. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to sign anything unless you want to. A Modest Inquiry into the Nature of Witchcraft. Now, this was written by John Hale 5 years after the witch trials. Now, Hale, he was a minister practicing in the town of Beverly, which is right next to Salem, and he was fashioned as Salem's witch hunter. Included in this book were his first-hand account, witness testimonies of the cases he observed, tips and tricks to identify and classify different types of witches, and a whole lot of Bible verses. Now, this man's birth information is available online, so I looked it up. It turns out he was a double Gemini. And guys, I just like to bring this detail up knowing full well how mad this man would be having his horoscope brought up to strangers. Now, a lot of folks aren't aware of this often, but in 17th century England, where the Puritans came from, astrology was quite mainstream. It was something like weathermen or economists are today. It lived side by side with religion. Now, don't get me wrong, the church did not condone astrology, but it shrugged and said, well, it must be good for something, because it was very much a part of the physician's practice of medicine back then. It was used for much more than just diagnosing a personality and relationship compatibility. Now, you can safely